there was a period of time in my life where my family was very devout, and then there was also another phase of my life where my family did a very good job of acting worldly. She is telling me as we're driving to work how she's going to tell the elders about all of this. She's going to tattle on my mom, she's going to tattle about the cross, she's going to tattle about the martial arts. And because I'm trying to get out of the vehicle, my foot is like skimming on the ground. I'm holding onto the door. Eventually, I'm able to grab her hand and pull it off, and I roll into a parking lot. And then, a couple years go by, and then you get caught looking at it, and she's like, "Wait a minute, I didn't even think this was an issue in our marriage."
My guest today says that being a Jehovah's Witness certainly came with its ups and downs. I'm going to share more about his story in just a second. First, this is Caesar Awakening. I'm the host of Amani channel. This is your home for XJW tales for people who've escaped the high control group known as Jehovah's Witnesses. Please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, comment, or share this content with someone who may find it valuable. Our today's guest, his name is Brandon Barker, and he left the organization after some introspection and realizing that it just wasn't for him. Let's meet Brandon now and learn his story. All right, so we have Brandon Barker in the house. Thanks so much, Brandon, for making some time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for inviting me on the channel and this opportunity. I appreciate it.
No worries at all. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your YouTube channel to start off with? Where can we find you and what kind of things you post about?
Okay, so the channel is called BornAgainExJW, and the whole premise of the channel is I've had the background of being a Jehovah's Witness, so in a way, I kind of speak their language. I know the way that they think. So when it comes to doing apologetics towards Jehovah's Witnesses, giving a reasonable defense for the faith that I have as a Christian now, that's the angle I take, is that I know what they're saying when they're saying it, and I can also read the subtext between the text. So that would be the channel to look into if you're looking for that crossover between the mind of a Jehovah's Witness and a now Christian.
I don't think any of it makes sense, but that's the issue there. So why don't you tell us a little bit about where you're from and how you're raised?
Okay, so I was a third generation Jehovah's Witness. So my grandfather was an elder. Um, I don't know if he still is because there's not a whole lot of communication between me and my family now. But we were a very devout Jehovah's Witness family. I was born in Florida, number four out of five kids, and we had, I would say, your pretty typical standard Jehovah's Witness upbringing as far as, not putting my hand on my heart, when it comes to acknowledging
Hmm.
the flag or pledging allegiance to the flag, being kicked out into the hallway or going to the library when it comes to celebrating holidays, that sort of thing. So that was my entire world growing up, as I was born into the culture and the world of Jehovah's Witnesses, and that is what I believed for a long period of time.
Gosh, so Armageddon, the world's controlled by Satan, all the propaganda.
Yes, exactly.
So for you growing up, what was school like for you? Was it just like believing in the truth and not really participating in the activities? Was it okay with you?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, when I would go to like conventions and things like that, and we would watch, examples of how to, I guess, talk about your faith when it came to your schoolmates or your workmates or something like that, I really absorbed a lot of that stuff. And I came from a very trusting perspective. So when I would hear something from my parents, this is true because it's true, I sort of accepted that circular reasoning. When I would look into things like insight in the scriptures, or I would read Watchtower articles and magazines, and they would cite different sources, or they would have a portion of a source, right? And then they would have that magical ellipsis afterwards, that dot, dot, dot. Um, I would just believe and trust that they had properly done their homework and their research. So when it came to Christmas being pagan, I was that weird Jehovah's Witness kid who would tell all of my classmates that Christmas was pagan, and here's why. And Halloween was super easy. I want to say, in a way, I was kind of on fire for it. I
Right.
wasn't argumentative, kind of a jovial person, just typically. So I get along with a wide swath of people, which I think helps me in my current profession of being a dance instructor. Um, but yeah, I would regurgitate the information that I was given as a small child and that I believed and trusted to be true.
That continued on through high school, and I guess later on, when did things start to change for you?
Okay, so here's the fun part about my family is, you know, I'll watch different content on YouTube of like this person will post a video and they're like former Bethelite ministerial servant and super Jehovah's Witness now, no longer. And then that video will get tons of views because we're like, whoa, this person was a super Jehovah's Witness. I was just a regular Jehovah's Witness, and I came from a congregation that was pretty loving as far as taking care of me and my family. So I never had anything abusive happen to me. I like to say that from the start is there was nothing overtly abusive that happened. I know that is the experience of some other formers, but I'm coming at from the perspective of they're wrong because they're wrong, not they're wrong because they did me wrong, if that makes sense.
Oh, it does. Like I had a fun time being a witness. Like our kingdom hall had a lot of youth, so we had a lot of folks to hang out with. We always did things together, had social activities. I had
Hmm.
no negative experiences when I was Joe's witness. I have only positive memories.
Yeah. Yeah, I really remember not, there was no distinguishment between, race. Again, this is my experience. This is not every former's
Hmm.
experience, but there was no distinguishing between race. Everyone in the congregation was my brother and my sister, and I genuinely had really loving experiences with people in my congregation. So, again, the reason I do what I do today is because the love that I have for them. Yeah, I genuinely believe that in some ways they are being misled, and that's why I have an entire channel dedicated towards not hating on them, but trying to share with them information or the truth that I have found. So that's the whole thrust of it. I'm trying to remember what got us off on that subject.
I was just asking about your high school experience and what led you away from the organization is kind of where we were going.
Yeah, so I was saying that I wasn't a super Jehovah's Witness. And the reason I bring that up is because there was a period of time in my life where my family was very devout. And then there was also another phase of my life where my family did a very good job of acting worldly. So what I mean is and I'm using their terms, their vernacular, right?
Right.
So they could kind of bridge the gap between like blending in with the congregation when we were around other Jehovah's Witnesses, and they could be around worldly people and also fit in quite nicely. So I had that as an example when it came to my parents and my older siblings, not all of them, but it was a way for me to sort of straddle that fence and
Hmm.
not, I could kind of appeal to whoever was around me. So the reason I bring that up is because I don't want to paint myself in a different light than I am I've always been a devout Jehovah's Witness and I never broke any of the rules or no, there was plenty of rules that I broke. I
Right.
just thought I was in the right group. That's what I thought.
Hmm. So when you say that, would your family live a double life? Would you consider it that? Was that kind of the mode that you guys took in terms of fitting in with worldly people?
A lot of that started right around the time that because we were super devout up until I was about, I want to say 9 or 10 years old. And then
Hmm.
that's when everything kind of kicked loose as far as my family going through a lot of turmoil. There was some infidelity on the behalf of my parents. I actually can't remember right now if it was my father first or if it was my mother first, but whoever, kicked that off, the
Right.
other parent retaliated by doing the same thing, right?
Right.
Sort of like you hurt me, I'm gonna.
They got their get back.
Yeah,
They got their
exactly.
lick back. I think the kids say they got their lick back.
Yeah. So it was like, you hurt me, I'm going to hurt you in the
Right.
same way. And so, of course, both of them were disfellowshipped for that. I want to say it was my mom who policed herself and went to the elders first and basically told on herself because we know that there's that sort of underneath rule of like whoever tells first gets the lesser punishment.
Hmm.
So she policed herself first, and then that resulted in her being disfellowshipped, but also my father being disfellowshipped. So I think that's when sort of that dual identity started coming into the picture is once the disfellowshipping happened, there was a period of time where you're already being treated like you're a dead
Work
person
like
walking.
right, right, right.
So why not, if my congregation's not going to believe I exist and my own family's not going to believe I exist, then I may as well just hang out with my workmates. I may as well hang out with my classmates, that sort of thing.
That makes total sense then. So your family kind of fell away for a moment, so that's when they kind of slipped into this sort of dual kind of life, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha. So then what happened with your faith during your family's period of kind of their slowing down and their stepping away sort of for a moment?
So what's interesting is I'm giving you the Cliff Notes version, but essentially I lived in North Florida, and during the whole divorce process, my mom took me and some of my siblings and moved us down to South Florida
Okay.
because she wanted to live with a man that she was dating. Now,
Hmm.
I actually really love that man. I call him my late stepfather because he actually passed away, but they had never actually got married.
Hmm.
So it was weird because he wanted to give us gifts on Christmas, or he wanted to give us gifts for our birthday, but he knew that she didn't like that. So as long as he did it like the day before or the
The
day
day
after,
after, right?
then it was okay,
He
you
was
know?
like not a witness. Obviously, he was worldly, as they say,
Correct. Yeah.
right?
So I got to experience some semblance of like holidays, and but it was never full on. It was never like the traditional
Open
Thanksgiving,
presents on
Christmas.
Christmas. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It was sort of a watered down version of it. There was no real decorations. There was no real reverence for the holiday or whatever. It was just sort of like an American thing that we did. So I would say there was a period of time where, because my mom wasn't a devout Jehovah's Witness, what teenage kid is going to be like, sure, I want to go to the Kingdom Hall and, go out in field service without my mom, so it wasn't that way. It was just, I got a little bit of time where I got to engage in sports. So I played football on a team for several years. I got to make, worldly friends and hang out in neighborhoods with kids who weren't Jehovah's Witnesses. So I got to experience a little bit of that. And then when my mother finally decided she had had enough of her family no longer speaking to her, that's when she decided to go hardcore back into the witness faith.
Hmm.
And you know what that process looks like, or what it used to look like. I know it's different now, but you're talking anywhere from
Good meetings for
9.
like about a year or two, and
Exactly.
right.
Yep. Yeah, 1 year or two without missing the mark.
Yeah,
You're
without
not
missing a
missing
meeting,
meetings.
you're right.
Hmm.
Sitting in the back, kind of everybody looks through you, and you still got to go like you're a witness, but you're not participating, you're not commenting anything.
Correct. And
Hmm.
the reason I bring that up is because we then moved from South Florida back to North Florida. Of course, we didn't have, a super connected relationship with my late stepfather anymore. And my mom did what she needed to do to get back in with the congregation. But what that meant is, because, I'm not of driving age or anything like that, my mom is driving us to the Kingdom Hall and then back home. We, in a small way, got to experience what my mom was experiencing through the disfellowshipping process, right? So
Hmm.
you know that you have to show up late because you don't want anyone to talk to you. So we would show up late with our mom, and then we would be in that second hall, right? And
Right.
then we would leave early before the prayer or the song had finished because we didn't want anyone to accidentally talk to her. So because I was not sticking around at the Kingdom Hall to talk with the friends, I was getting to experience what my mom was experiencing as a disfellowship person.
Hmm.
And I had already had family treating us like we were spiritually weak, on the blood family side. So it was really interesting as a, early teen moving into late teen, experiencing that disfellowshipping process, even though I wasn't disfellowship myself, getting to kind of see it through her eyes a little bit.
Did
And then
that make
ultimate,
you, did it affect your attitude about baptism? Were you already baptized at that point, or how did that
of
affect your,
course,
okay.
yeah, by seeing my mom, my dad, and eventually my older sister be disfellowshipped for virtually the same reason, I equated baptism not with a declaration, not with an outward declaration that I was committed to the organization and to, Jehovah God, but I viewed it as this is step one in your
Getting this
process to getting
fellowship,
disfellowshipped.
right?
Yeah,
Which it kind of is like,
yeah,
I mean, I know a lot of folks who've been either disfellowshipped or no longer participating, and it seems like if you get baptized, that's one thing that's guaranteed is you will get disfellowshipped if you mess up.
yeah, exactly. So it was for me, it was like scary. It's like, well, I'm just not going to pull that trigger, and then I can't get in trouble.
Right. Makes sense.
Hmm. So I'm trying to think of why necessarily that was important that I didn't get baptized.
Well, just telling your story. So, what do you remember happening after that?
I remember this is probably one of the first wake up moments for Brandon. And the reason I say it was one of my first wake up moments is because I was under the impression, and I don't think that absorbed a teaching that didn't exist in the Jehovah's Witnesses. But I was under the impression that when someone shows repentance, when they come back to the congregation and they are reinstated, that there is a celebration in heaven. You know, the one last sheep has been found, right?
Right, right.
So I will say on behalf of my congregation, they actually did reach out, you know, like as soon as my mom was reinstated, love bomb, which is awesome, right?
That's a good thing actually, because a lot of folks say they get treated like a second class citizen when they get reinstated.
Right. So on behalf of my congregation, I can give them kudos there. For my immediate family, we're talking my aunt, my uncles, my grandfather, my grandmother, my siblings. We're still treating my mom like she was spiritually weak, like she was a second class citizen, and even like she was disfellowshipped.
Mhm.
Like they used that teaching as essentially a spiritual cudgel to keep her like the lowest of low. And I love my mom. You know, there's no man in the house anymore. I'm a teenage boy coming up and I'm seeing this downright abuse, like emotional abuse of you know, we went to a convention. We were supposed to go to a convention in Mobile, Alabama, but instead we went to a convention in Central Florida because that's where all the extended family was going to be.
Mhm.
And I thought it was going to go back to how it was. You know, you'd sit there, you'd listen to hours of monotone speaking, and you'd, you know, race each other to try and see who could get to the scriptures first in your Bible. And
With
then
binoculars looking at the girls across the way.
yeah, exactly. I was waiting for that lunch break, man. I was like, you know, because you'd scope out who all the pretty girls were,
Yep.
and me and my cousins would get together, and we would roam that entire stadium, just like messing around, you know, for that
Oh yeah.
entire lunch
That
break.
was kind of the tradition. Like go get a Danish and go see you could see.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So that's what I was looking forward to, and I could see my family across the stadium, and I was waiting for that lunch break. And when the lunch break happened, and I went over there, they were all gone. It was like they had all disappeared and they did it on purpose. They did that for 3 days in a row. They did
Wow.
not want to associate with us. And it was like, not only was my mom not being associated with, but I wasn't being associated with. And by virtue, my little sister either. It was embarrassing. It was a
Hmm.
really low moment for me. So, um, I remember at the very end, you know, how like witnesses typically go to like a big dinner or something after the convention. We had to essentially invite ourselves and be
Hmm.
unwelcome guests for an entire dinner. And just as an awkward teenager, I was like, this is like torture. You know, it's like
Hmm.
you know that you're not supposed to be here. Nobody wants you there. So that was like my first wake up moment is I'm like, we are taught from the scripture that this person is supposed to be received back with like a feast with like celebration. And it was the opposite of that from my family.
So how would you say that would that sort of cause any realization or were you like this isn't really a loving organization? How'd that kind of affect you?
So, I mean, ultimately it was that. It was Now, I couldn't say that about everyone in the organization, so
Right.
I didn't draw a broad brush sort of
Okay.
feeling from that, right? It's like I thought there was something flawed with my family. I
Okay.
figured it was like a personal vendetta that was being exercised through the disfellowshipping arrangement. But I still had people in our congregation who took care of me and my family as we were growing up. So I was still thinking, well, they're good people, they're wonderful. You know, maybe it is still the truth, even if they get things wrong sometimes. So fast forward a little bit, there's another waking up moment where um, I'm a bit of a artsy person, so I love drawing, have done since the time I was little. I even there's like a little picture of Daniel in the lion's den from when I would sit in the Kingdom Hall, and my mom would give me a yellow notepad with blue lines on it, and I would draw whatever I was hearing on the stage. So I just drew all the time. And I think because I was number four to five kids, my mom was like down for me paying attention. So she just gave me that pad of paper and let me go. So I would draw whatever I saw. And I just love art. I love comic book heroes. And so as I was growing up, you know, in school, there'd be kids who would want me to draw things for them. And as we were getting older and older, and we're getting close to, let's say, 18, closer to when you can get a tattoo, I would start getting requests to draw things that aren't necessarily great if you're a Jehovah's Witness.
Little body art maybe.
Yeah, exactly. So I'd have classmates of mine ask me, "Hey, can you draw me this? I'm thinking about getting it for a tattoo. Hey, can you draw me that?" So I had one classmate ask me if I could draw them a cross. So what's funny is like that artsy part of my brain took over and just I just shut down all the Jehovah's Witnessness. And I was like, cool, I'm drawing a cross, so I'm drawing like the coolest cross I can. And I remember getting to work. I worked for my aunt. I put that drawing in my locker. And at the time, I was also sort of secretly practicing martial arts. So my aunt knew.
A lot of straddling the fence I hear here.
Oh yeah, yeah. So I wasn't sneaking off to be with girls. I was going and doing capoeira, and then
Right.
I was drawing crosses for pagans, and like, I was doing all kinds of nasty stuff. And there was one day where she had to pick me up from my house to bring me to work because my vehicle had broken down. And she gets me in the car, and we pull out of the driveway, and she turns to me and she says, whose car was that in the driveway? And my mom was dating someone else at the time. And I said, "Oh, that's my mom's boyfriend." And my mom had already been reinstated at this point. So my aunt gets mad at that because she's bought in Jehovah's Witness. So we're driving a little bit further, and she's like, "Oh, and what's this?" And she opens the center console and she pulls my drawing out. So she had gone into my locker and she had found this drawing across, and she put it in her center console and she pulls it out and she's like, "And what is this?" And I said, "That's a drawing I'm doing for a friend." And then we get a little bit closer to work, and I think she brought up the martial arts that I was studying, and she is telling me as we're driving to work how she's going to tell the elders about all of this. She's going to tattle on my mom. She's going to tattle about the cross. She's going to tattle about the martial arts. And I got so frustrated. I was like, you know what? I don't feel like working for my aunt anymore. It had just become
Mhm.
too much at that point. So I said, you can go ahead and take your job and you can shove it. I was 16. I wasn't very nice at that time. Um, and I remember opening the door while the door was moving, or sorry, while the car was moving. I opened the door because I expected that if I did that, she knew A, I was serious, and B, that she should slow down. And the opposite happened because we were heading towards a red light, and I anticipated that she would have to stop because there's stopped cars at this red light. Well, instead of stopping, she grabbed onto me. Like she reached across the car and she grabbed onto my collar, and she mashes on the gas. So now we're heading faster towards these vehicles, and she quickly swerved into the turning lane, which happened to be empty, which thank God it was,
Right.
because otherwise we would have we would have had a
Caused the
head-on collision.
accident.
Yep.
Yeah.
So she's holding on to me and speeding into this turning lane. And because I'm trying to get out of the vehicle, my foot is like skimming on the ground. I'm holding on to the door. Eventually, I'm able to grab her hand and pull it off. And I roll into a parking lot and I just start running. So I remember running, running, running. And then finally, I feel like when my heart rate came down, I was able to contact my mom on my cell phone and just tell her what happened. And then it was this whole process of like, well, do we file kidnapping charges? Do we, because this was a lot of things happened in those 13 seconds that were
Right.
pretty crazy.
Were you hurt all throughout the ordeal?
Hurt as in the sense of like, I remember I was running and I felt like the Flash. Like I could not feel
Okay.
the earth beneath my feet. And when I finally stopped, I remember being in front of like a guitar center or something like that. And I was like, okay, while I'm waiting for my mom, I can go in there and check out some guitars. So again, 16-year-old kid. And then I look down and I feel my pants sticking to my knees, but there's nothing wrong with my suit pants, like, which was nice because my brother bought me that suit. And I'm like, okay, I'm fine. And then I can feel them sticking. So I like pull my pant legs up and I had these two big, nasty, like gnarly, like scabs already forming on my knees because I had hit the ground with both knees and I kind of tucked and ran. So I was bleeding, but it wasn't anything crazy when I had to
Right.
jump out of the car.
Well, that's good at least.
Yeah.
So did you end up snitching to the elders?
I think when she saw my resolve, it kind of threw her off a little
She
bit.
forgot about that.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
I think she could kind of tell that I was serious about it. So then it was just, and I think she knew she done screwed up too.
Right.
So she really pulled back as well because I'm sure somebody told her like that's an attempted kidnapping. Like you can't do that to another human being. It doesn't
Hmm.
matter if they're your nephew or not. So she kind of pulled back a little bit. And I just remember I went and made amends because I wanted my final paycheck. not because I thought she was right and I was wrong or anything like that. I had to because she was holding it hostage.
Right. So after this ordeal, like, what did you do? What ended up happening?
So because I was working for her, she was actually an owner of a dance studio.
Okay.
So after I got done with football, I got into doing construction and doing, cleaning and handyman work. And I just figured I would go and work for my aunt, cleaning the studio, doing a bit of handiwork, make some extra cash during the summer. And she had other plans. So she started to teach me how to dance and then started to teach me how to teach dance
It's like
at the
ballet.
same
What kind,
time.
what kind of like modern dance? What kind of dance?
Ballroom and Latin.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, so pretty much anything you can do with a partner, I can
Yep.
teach it.
Okay, cool.
So that's what I got into, and it was very exciting for me. It's like again, because I'm artsy, I love drawing. When I got into dance and it was involved with music, I'm like, I just got to keep going with this thing. I would do it even if I wasn't getting paid. I was just that fascinated with it. Hang on
Hmm.
just a tick. Sorry, I got a call coming in. Did it blank
It's
me
all
out?
good. You kind of flinched for a second too.
All right. I'm gonna go ahead and turn on Do Not Disturb just so it gets rid of that. Okay. Good to keep going.
Yeah, good to keep going.
Where did I leave off?
Talking about dance.
Yeah, so pretty much anything you can do with a partner, that's what I can teach. And I wanted to get heavier into it. I wanted to get more serious about it. I didn't want to go to college or anything else like that. So my one of my siblings was also in dance, and they had moved to Ohio in order to pursue a career in dancing. And they found a studio that was competitive. And that's really what I was looking for because my aunt's studio, there was no competition or any way to excel past just being a dance teacher. So when this sibling told me about the studio and the fact that there were 10 dance champions who worked there and they could get me to competition and coach me and train me, I was like, okay, I'm all in. And at the same time, this sibling sort of thrust this beautiful girl into my awareness. Hey, there's a beautiful girl that takes lessons here who's going to move from being a student into a teacher. So what that meant for me is I couldn't fraternize with my students, but again, I was 17 at this point. If they became a professional, then you can hang out with them outside of the studio. So I'm aware that there's a beautiful girl there. She's going to go from being a student to a professional, which means we can hang out. And I started checking out her MySpace and falling in love with her from afar. She was into all the same stuff I was, like guitar and drawing and horses and the beach. And so she had all of these similar interests. Now, all of that would be creepy if we didn't end up getting married. But thankfully, this
It all
girl is
worked
now my
out.
wife.
Right.
So
Stalked her little baby stalking. It's all
yeah,
good.
little baby stalking, and it's romantic if you end up with that person.
Right.
Otherwise, it would be creepy behavior. So that is ultimately how I ended up moving from Florida to Ohio, and I think that played a big role in getting me away from the indoctrination for a long enough period of time to where I could start to hear a voice inside of my own head that I wasn't listening to before.
So just think for yourself a little bit. Just take a little break so you can start getting some other thoughts in your mind.
Yes, exactly.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think you have to step away from the busyness of the Jehovah's Witnesses because that ultimately is, and again, if this hurts anyone, I'm sorry to use this language, but that ultimately is how a high control group or a cult controls you is they shut down aspects of your critical thinking ability by keeping you so busy. There's literally nothing left capacity wise in order to be able to think.
Even your time becomes like a resource that isn't available because you're going on field trips, you're going to meetings, all you're waking up, studying for meetings. Everything
Yeah.
you do is prepared in for serving Jehovah, basically.
Yeah, you're right. It's like for me and you, I'm assuming, it was the three meetings a week,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Yeah, these
Sundays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, family
yeah.
Bible study, field service, like
Yeah.
we had one free day, I think.
Yeah, so these new Jehovah's Witnesses actually have it a lot easier. But yeah, it's like Mondays in preparation for Tuesday, Wednesdays in preparation for theocratic ministry school, Fridays getting
Hmm.
ready for Saturday, and then field service is Saturday too. So whether you went to meetings on Saturday or Sunday, every single day of the week was pretty much accounted
Yeah.
for the organization. And when you were outside of the Kingdom Hall, I don't know about you, but I didn't want to talk about God. I
I
had
don't,
done
yeah,
it
we,
enough.
by the time I was a teenager, we were drinking and partying, and so we were in the streets and hanging out with our friends, so it wasn't even a thought.
exactly. Yeah, there was just no capacity for it and or desire. So
Hmm.
I think when I moved from Florida to Ohio, again, it gave me that time to start getting a little bit more capacity and hearing that sort of rational voice within that I was able to start listening to and just start asking questions, like
Hmm.
asking some good pointed questions. And when you and I were talking over the phone the other day, ultimately, I want to say the final crack in the foundation for me was meeting people outside of my organization that shared a different faith or belief than me. And what I could not work out is they seemed to have a relationship with Jesus, which bugged me for the most part because Jesus was 2000 years ago. How do you
Right.
know him? Why do you talk to him? What are you doing? You know, for us it was always Jehovah. Jesus was sort of that guy we mentioned every once in a while.
Yep.
So they seem to have a relationship with Jesus. They seem to pray. They seem to have answered prayer. They had a something obvious to me. They didn't convince me of it. I convinced myself just by virtue of using my eyes, right? And spending a lot of time with them. So this was, of course, Chelsea and her family. So I get closer to
But
them and I'm
your
thinking,
girlfriend and her family, your dance partner and her family.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So I'm getting closer to them and I'm thinking to myself, I'm not going to the Kingdom Hall. I'm not baptized, but I am one of Jehovah's Witnesses. So when Armageddon happens, I'm going to be okay. They're going to be destroyed. How do I make that work?
Right. That's not compute. Doesn't work for me. Didn't work for me.
Right. So it was really difficult for me, especially when I was having conversations with them. And what's great is they knew what they believed. I had talked with, some so-called Christians growing up that didn't really know what they believed. They just sort of believed it because their parents believed it.
Yep.
So when I was Jehovah's Witness, I thought that was a sign of weakness. Therefore, I'm in the truth. It was a big logical leap, but it was the one I was making at the time. And then when I was getting to know them and I'm hearing them defend their faith, but they were always doing it in a way where I knew that Chelsea and her family loved me.
Hmm.
And it was evident. Like, even though I didn't believe the same way that they did, I
It didn't
could
matter.
tell that they
Right.
had genuine love for me. And they
Hmm.
wanted what was best for me. And they were never forcing anything. I had more questions towards them, and it was more like an attack on my end. And then for them, they would just answer and they'd be able to back it up. And then I was sort of left defenseless in the sense of like, well, I don't have my insight in the scriptures right now, so I don't know how to answer you, but I'll figure it out.
Right.
So that was, I think, sort of one of the final cracks for me is I met a family outside of the organization that shared different sets of beliefs, and I couldn't square the fact that they were going to be dead at Armageddon and I was going to make it because I was in the right group.
Well, when you think about it, it doesn't make sense that God would destroy anyone who's like a good person in general. Like it just didn't make sense to me that because I had roommates who were not witnesses, and I was these are good brothers though. So why would God destroy them? It just didn't make sense to me.
Hmm.
And that's sort of what started my slide out of the organization, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
Hmm.
So, I mean, it was that, and then I'd love to say that I just became a Christian and I've had a beautiful life ever since then, but that actually wasn't the case. It was I didn't convert at that moment. I actually spent 6 or 7 years as like an agnostic.
Hmm.
I didn't know, I didn't care. I was like agnostic and different.
Well, that makes sense because when you finally realize that maybe the truth was not as truthful as you may have thought, it kind of can create some sort of disillusionment.
Hmm.
So maybe that's what kind of happened as you kind of went through that process.
Oh yeah, yeah. It was like I wasn't praying, I wasn't reading the Bible. Of course, I wasn't going to meetings. I didn't find a congregation up in Ohio. I had zero interest. My interest was I have a girlfriend now. Um, I'm focused on my dance career. I want to get
Hmm.
as good as I possibly can. I want to compete. I want to compete at a national or even an international level, which I have done. I've gotten to do all those things, and that's awesome. But that was my singular focus is everything what revolved around my career. And so I didn't really put any thought into anything theological or metaphysical or anything like that.
Hmm.
Um, it wasn't until years and years later when I was, I'll be completely transparent. There was a period of time where I was struggling with like this pornography addiction that I had developed since the time I was 13 years old. I got exposed to porn when I was 13. Actually, wait, I think it was 11. It was even sooner than that. So I had a very bad relationship with that. And because of that, I of course didn't disclose that to Chelsea when we were dating, and I definitely didn't disclose it when we were married. And then, a couple years go by and then you get caught looking at it and she's like, "Wait a minute, this I didn't even think this was an issue in our marriage." And what's funny is like the organization has their thumb on the thing of something true when it comes to like pornography can be destructive, but they don't talk about why. So some people are already getting mad at me because I'm calling it like sinful or wrong or whatever. But the truth is, if the organization had pointed out different aspects of why pornography is wrong and bad for you that are just outside of it gives God a heart boo-boo, then
Hmm.
I probably wouldn't struggle with it like I did back then. So there was a period of time in my marriage where it was like the third or fourth time I had gotten caught by her. And there was something about this particular night that ultimately I could see I had broken her heart. Now, I had been caught before by her. I already knew porn was bad. I already knew it was shameful. I had already been caught by her before. And it was like, even though I was ashamed that she caught me, I didn't care. I still wanted to keep doing it. I
Right.
was just, I was endeavoring to get better at hiding it. And that's kind of what an addict does, right? And I'm not attributing it the same as like cocaine or alcohol or something like that, but that's the way your brain is working. It's like chemically hardwired to seek out that dopamine hit
Oh yeah.
by thinking about the thing, you get dopamine, and then when you get the thing, you get more dopamine.
Well, it's probably not even the porn. It's probably what happens after you, as you're watching the porn, like the arousal that is caused the addiction. Probably is what how it rewires your brain. I would imagine.
Oh yeah, yeah. When you look into the neuroplasticity of how porn affects the brain, and again, this is like you could attack this subject from a completely secular angle. In fact, there's an organization called Fight the New Drug that literally tries to not use religious speech. They just try and use like secular language because that's their whole thing is they're trying to show people how it has an effect on the brain. And because of that neuroplasticity, there's like all sorts of Gen Z and Gen Alpha who have erectile dysfunction in their late teens, early 20s. There's all these guys with ED. And then you have a increase in like violent things that happen during sexual encounters, and it's all being linked to sort of this pornography crisis that's happening. So it definitely had an effect on my marriage. And again, I had been caught before, but there was something special and horrible about this night when she caught me finally, and it was like I could see how I looked in her eyes.
Hmm.
And I mean, it broke me. I was like the lowest I've ever been in my entire life. And it was like not as a Christian, not but as a man, I had I had broken the vow that I made in front of her whole family. When her father handed her over to me and said, "You're the man of her life. Now you're going to take care of her and protect her." I broke that vow. I broke my vow to her that it's just you and me forever, no other women. And so even if you just take any theological or religious things out of the picture, I was not a good person in that instance. I was seeking out something that was bad and I was doing it on purpose, not because I was falling into it like a mistake, but because it was wrong and I desired it. And I enjoyed it when I was doing it, but I automatically felt that shame afterwards. And it was that night that I was like, I've got to reach out to something. I've got to reach up because I'm on my back right now, and there's nothing I can do to change what I've done. And it doesn't matter how many good things I do in the future. I can't undo the hurt that I've done now. And so that ultimately was what led me to start looking into a relationship with God again. So that was the catalyst for me.
All right, so we're talking to Brandon Barker about his awakening journey, how he was raised Jehovah's Witness, came from a fourth generation, what do you say, third generation, fourth generation?
Yeah, third generation.
Third generation, and then got married, married a non-believer, and then had a little bit of an addiction problem. Why don't you get into how you resolve that issue, Brandon?
So part of the process of resolving the issue, because like I said, there had been moments where I had like struggled with it before and been caught doing it before, but there was ultimately no change in attitude towards it. Just again, sort of like this internal resolve to get better at hiding it. And then ultimately, again, when I think I saw the pain that I had actually caused, so it wasn't an accident, it wasn't a mistake, but it was actual like I had done something and somehow it needed to be fixed, but I couldn't fix it on my own. So of course that starts making you ask more theological questions. That makes you start asking more moral questions. That makes you ask questions that are not material. They're not made of matter. These are concepts of like good and evil and right and wrong and courage and bravery and deception and lies. And so all of these concepts that are outside of the physical realm. So I started asking those things and I started diving deep into okay, so if there is a God and there is a such if there's such a thing as evil, then there's something that's good that I'm measuring it against. If there's even one thing that's ultimately evil, then God exists. So I was coming at it from sort of a general theist perspective, but I had this upbringing as a Jehovah's Witness, so I had this Christian language that I used, or what I call Christianese, where I had things like God and Jesus and salvation and all these other terms, but what I had to do first is I had to take an examination of them, and I wanted to figure out, okay, I used to hate Christians and what they believed. So now I'm going to listen to them, but I'm not just going to listen to what they say. I'm going to listen to how they argue for their faith. So I started listening to debates between like, Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens and Christians. And I started listening to Christians talk to Mormons, and I started listening to Christians talk to Jehovah's Witnesses, and Christians talk to Muslims. And I was just listening to it from this perspective of not like, hey, let me see if my team wins, because I wasn't on their team. I didn't like
Right.
them. The Trinity was unholy and pagan, and hell was disgusting, and everything that Christendom believed was bad and evil and wrong. And so when I was listening to him, I was just trying to see if it made sense when I stepped into the audience member's seat and I was listening to two parties argue for their position, who was making more sense for me ultimately. Um, and I kept seeing Christianity have roots and be grounded in reality and rational thought and logic. And I kept seeing this happen over and over and over again.
It seems like
And
it was more to see the thought process behind how people defended their religion, basically.
I think it was a realization that just because a person is a person of faith does not mean that they have to check their rationale and their higher thinking at the door.
Okay.
So I understand that there's a group of people and believers out there who think, like you have to have faith like that of a child, and that's great and everything. I think that's talking about your innocence and your trust towards your Heavenly Father. But ultimately, I know that the greatest command that comes from Scripture is to love God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind. And mind is included in that. You don't get brownie points for loving Jesus, but being an idiot. So it was like when I saw people taking a rational perspective for just talking about things like the contingency argument. I know that everything that exists has a cause, right? Because that's my entire experiencing. I'm not thinking of things that I know don't exist. What I'm doing is everything in my existence has a cause. Like that car, like this laptop, like my microphone, all of it has a cause. So I'm reasoning back from what I do know, which is everything having a cause, to what I don't know, which is what is that cause. And if the cause is not made of matter, time, or space, because those three things, according to the current understanding in science, came into existence at a singular point in time. If those three things came into existence, then whatever caused them can't be made of matter, time, and space. It needs to be spaceless, timeless, and immaterial. And that sounds an awful lot like God.
God. Hmm.
But it doesn't get you to the Christian God. That's just one argument. So I would hear arguments from contingency, and then I would hear arguments for like the fine tuning of the universe, or other people will call that like the teleological argument. So I started getting into these things that I couldn't possibly begin to just put into layman's terms, but I'm absorbing some of it. So I'm seeing the rationale behind a theist position or even a deist position. And then when I started to understand there's a distinction between all of the different faith systems. And I think I was, again, because I'm taking a spectator seat, I'm able to see this because I'm not personally doing any arguments or attacks, and I'm not receiving any. So I'm not on the defensive. I'm just in this open state to where I can actually hear. So what I began to notice is this phrase, there's really only two religions on the planet. There's the do religions, and there's the done religion. And
I've
if you
never heard
think,
that. I've never heard that before.
well, the way it's put is like all of the religions claim that you have to do something, be something, or think something in order to achieve something from God, source, universe, ether, Allah, whatever it is,
Okay.
right? So you have to do something in order to receive, right?
Right.
Whereas Christianity in its purest form, all you have to do is receive the work that's already been done for you. So it doesn't matter how good I do. It doesn't matter what great thoughts I think. Um, that can't get me into, some people would say, the kingdom or heaven or into good graces. Those things can't do anything for me. It's already been done. All I have to do is receive it. So I was noticing, because again, we were Jehovah's Witnesses, we thought we were a Christian group. And then when I panned out and I realized we didn't actually believe anything that Christendom believed or taught, um, I started to realize that people are advocating not for a free reign to sin, but they're advocating for you don't actually have to do anything to be righteous. You receive your righteousness. You're actually unrighteous. You're the opposite of it. You're if you could choose between doing something evil and doing something good, you'd more than likely choose this, right? Which I had evidence of. I'm not putting anyone else on the chopping block. That's
Right.
me. When I had the opportunity to do something evil, I ran to it and I wasn't a good person. Now, that moment when you realize that sucks because I thought I was, right? I thought I generally don't lie. I do sometimes. I generally don't cheat. I do sometimes. And I couldn't just keep excusing it away as like I was just making mistakes when I realized that it was a significant pattern and it actually had an effect not just on myself, but the people around me. So like who's going to pay for that? Who's going to account for that? And then when I realized that I didn't actually have to do anything but receive not only mercy, because mercy is not getting what you deserve, but I received something called grace that I had never heard of. And
Right.
grace is getting something that you don't deserve.
Right.
So, like in the New World Translation, they call it undeserved kindness, which sounds kind of nice. It's like, oh, God gave you a little undeserved kindness. And it's like, but it's so belittling, right? I think in
Hmm.
a way that translation actually belittles what occurred there. Because again, I could go into a courtroom, I could be guilty of a crime, and the judge could decide to be merciful towards me, right? I could say, I'm really sorry for what I've done. Is there any way you can lighten my sentence? And if he says, not only am I going to lighten your sentence, but I'm going to give you a mansion, and you're like, well, that doesn't make sense at all. That's in a way something analogous to grace, which is like not only do you not receive what you were supposed to receive as far as justice is concerned, but you receive adoptionship into the family of God and you get to receive the Holy Spirit. Now you have the helper who's helping you guide you into all truth. So it's like there's this huge like the song Amazing Grace means so much more to me now because I actually understand it now.
Hmm. That's really interesting. So I've never even like looked at like my faith on that kind of a deep level, I guess. So
Hmm.
kind of new to me, like even considering, I mean, I sort of look at grace as receiving something that you don't deserve, I guess, kind of like forgiving someone when they haven't asked for forgiveness, kind of sort of.
Right,
But I haven't really thought about that is sort of the benefit of being sort of a human and being like receiving God's grace is what it is really.
right.
Hmm.
Well, it was the way it was articulated to me, and again, I'm not listening to like any particular stream of Christianity. Like I'll listen to Catholics debate, I'll listen to Greek Orthodox, I'll listen to Protestants, and I will just listen to again, if this person says something and they can back it up, I'm okay. That's how we should all be. If somebody
Hmm.
says something that's true, we should believe it, right? And then there's tools that we can utilize in order to get to the truth of something. But they kept saying, it's like there's again, there's just the act of receiving that mercy or not getting what you deserve, which would be justice, and then there's like, but you actually get something more.
Hmm.
Or in Christian circles, they call it the great exchange. It's like Christ receives, or Jesus receives, all of that judgment and wrath that was supposed to be placed on us is placed on him, right?
Right.
And then we actually, it's not just that happens, but there's this great exchange of like, in place of that judgment, we actually receive his righteousness.
Mm.
So when I stand in front of him in judgment, I actually am not seen as the things that I've done in the past. I am seen as the righteousness of Christ. And the reason that's so important is because, again, it's not anything that I did in order to earn or elicit that sort of grace. It is complete. It is the word gift. It is like completely
Right.
free,
It's not
right?
contingent on any sort of action, any sort of behavior, any sort of thinking.
Right. Whereas when I look at the other worldviews, karma is all stick and no mercy. Like every what goes around comes around, right? You get exactly what you deserve. I think it sounds good in principle when I'm talking about other people. I don't want exactly what I deserve. I
Hmm.
really don't. And I think if anybody's being really honest with themselves, they don't want exactly what they deserve either. Um, or if you look at a person who finds themselves in a bad situation, like let's say that karma is somehow playing into a reincarnation cycle, is the person who's going through some sort of like let's say sex trafficking, is that some sort of karma that they invited into their life
Right.
from a previous life that they don't have no knowledge of, and the
Hmm.
universe is just cycling them through this sort of punishment cycle. So I had a problem with karma when I looked at the other, like I said, faith systems. You look at Islam, and it's again, do your good works outweigh your bad works? It was very much a scale system. Same
Hmm.
thing with the Jehovah's Witnesses. It was take in accurate knowledge and also do as much as you possibly can, and you still don't know if Jehovah's going to have mercy on you.
So through this examination process, did you realize that you weren't a Jehovah's Witness, or did you kind of just have this epiphany that you weren't a Jehovah's Witness anymore? What sort of, how did you balance
I
that out?
I knew that they did not have the truth.
Okay.
So when I say that, it was like for the first time I became a vegan and I realized I was claiming to be a vegan, but I was giving people my favorite ground beef recipe, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
So I had taken on the name of a practice, right? But I wasn't actually following the practice at all.
Right.
It'd be like if somebody was telling you how great they were at jujitsu and then they talk all about how they throw jabs and right hooks, and you're like, well, that's
That's
boxing.
boxing, right?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So, for this, we were walking around saying that we were Christians, yet we didn't believe in we didn't believe that the Son always existed with the Father for all eternity, and they shared the spirit of love between them. We thought that when Jesus came back to life, that he was a spirit. Like he was an angel before, and then he became a human, and then when he died, instead of resurrecting, his body was just dissolved by Jehovah, and then he came back as an angel, and he falsified bodies in order to convince his followers that he had actually resurrected. And then it's like, oh, lo and behold, when you look back into that time period in history, Gnosticism was actually kind of a big deal, and it had its little fingers in different worldviews.
Hmm.
And then when you realize that there are actually some gospels that share the same qualities, like they'll talk about how Jesus' feet never touched the earth. So he wasn't even physical in their thinking. Then you fast forward 2,000 years and you got Jehovah's Witnesses who are saying when he came from the grave, it actually wasn't as a physical being. It was a spirit creature that came from the grave. And I'm just thinking to myself, I'm like, that doesn't work in a modern day court system. When we talk
Right.
about evidence, like I'll use, what was that famous saying? If the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit.
Yeah, OJ during his trial. If the glove doesn't fit, you must have quit. Yep.
Yeah. So that piece of evidence, that glove was integral to the case, right? If they had taken any other glove with any other blood stain on it and presented it to the courtroom, that line wouldn't work. Right? So,
Hmm.
in the same sense, if any other body walked out of that tomb than the one that went into that tomb, then that's not evidence. That is a false piece of evidence. So, If you want to tell me that you're a Christian and you believe that Jesus falsified evidence in order to convince his followers that he had raised from the dead, there's something foundationally wrong with your belief system.
Right.
So that's what it was for me, is realizing that even though I had spoken Christianese and believed I was a part of a Christian group, I was 1,000 yards off by being 2 inches off. Like by being as close to it as I thought we were, I was actually further away from the truth because we thought we were with the truth, if that makes sense.
Definitely. So through your examination, basically led you to where you are now, where you're more of apologist,
hmm
apologetic. What's the expression? Apologetic?
Yeah, so yeah, you could say a apologist. I would say hobbyist apologist
Okay.
because my primary volition in life is doing ballroom dance and coaching that, right?
Right.
That's what I have my titles in, and but I love the Word of God. I love defending my faith, and I love sharing it with others too.
So that
And then
basically, so is that basically where you are now with your faith? You're basically a Christian, and that is where you are now.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Okay.
again, I share it with what's funny is I don't have to have anybody tell me to share my faith or how to share my faith. Funny story is like one time I was in a sauna and I had my headphones in and I think I'm reading a book on my phone and someone comes in and just starts talking to me and we're shooting the breeze about random stuff and then suddenly it gets into metaphysical properties and faith versus non-faith and we spent 30 minutes in there and we're talking about God essentially, and I'm sharing my faith, but it was through no like I didn't seek this person out. I'm in a towel in the sauna.
It's more holistic through conversation, basically.
Yeah.
Not through any
It,
door-to-door preaching, mandatory door-to-door preaching.
well, what I realized is like each person, if I truly believe what I believe, right? If I read those scriptures and I believe what I believe, each person is going to stand in judgment in front of the judgment throne of Christ, right? And you're either going to receive mercy, justice, or grace, or two out of those three. Um, and what I realize is I don't have to make other people think the way I think,
Right.
right? Which I feel like people kind of get into these days is like the internet has made us think that like we can just command that other people think like us.
Hmm.
And for me, it was like the reason I'm a Christian is because of the research I've done. And it's again like if I wasn't the type of person who would change my mind depending on research, then I would still be a Jehovah's Witness. So
Hmm.
I think I've evidenced by my shift that the reason I have changed my thinking on something is not just because I met a hot girl or just because I met a family or because I felt bad about myself at one point. So I needed some sort of emotional crutch to get me through this bad feeling I had. But it was more or less like when I actually started inspecting things and I decided, I've got my career, but I'm also going to take a cursory look at some of these things. The more research I did, the more reasonable it was that when Jesus was executed and put into the tomb, he walked out of it 3 days later. And
Hmm.
that's the reason for the split in time between BC and AD. That's the reason that that message has moved to nearly every corner of the globe. Um, just the issue of there being like actual rights and wrongs, like who decides those things. So I wanted to figure out stuff in life that I thought really mattered besides
Hmm.
just being busy and going to work.
So now that you're at this point in your faith, do you have a relationship with your family who are still Jehovah's Witnesses, or have you kind of left them behind?
My arms are always open for my family. So if they call me and they want to still have a relationship, I, of course, am going to be there for them because I know that what they think they are doing is correct.
Hmm.
I know to a degree they've been convinced that if they do the ignoring or the shunning or whatever it is, or even removing a person who is not just spiritually weak, but like I'm a heretic, and they've fully discovered me at this point. In fact, it was a couple of months ago I had a conversation with a family member, and they told me that they discovered my channel.
Okay.
Um, so just to, if anybody's listened up to this point or this long, just to let you know, I started my YouTube channel. I kept it secret from my family because I didn't want to hurt them, and because some of them were still enjoying that loophole of Brandon's not baptized, therefore he's never been disfellowshipped, therefore we
Right.
can keep talking to him. Well, when my family discovered that I had a YouTube channel where I technically bracket into what they would consider an apostate, So I'm not someone who's a Christian. I'm someone who talks bad about the organization,
Right.
which means I'm an apostate, which means I'm worse than a demon. Stay away, right?
That's Jehovah's Witness definition. I have a different definition, of course, towards that word, but that is what Jehovah's Witnesses believe.
Yeah, that's me stepping into their definition hardcore
Right.
because that's not the actual
I
definition.
think they're lying, seeking to devour other Jehovah's Witnesses and lead them out of the truth is what they think apostate means.
Right, exactly. So,
Hmm.
um, now that my family discovered that, I recently, my older brother passed away a couple of
Okay.
months ago. Um,
Condolences.
I appreciate that. And I'm the problem is that older brother, out of all five of us, he was the best communicator. He was the one who would text you randomly when he thought of you. He was the one who would call you or return your calls, or he has such a big heart and very loyal, and he loved all of us, right? Um, and when he passed away, I told each of my siblings and I told close members of my family, I said, listen, we all suck at communicating with each other. We're really terrible at it. I said, Kevin was the best of us. I'm going to make an effort to reach out to you guys at least once a week or once a month. We're going to communicate more. We're going to be involved in each other's lives more. So after my brother passed away, I said, if he dies, because he was in the hospital at the time, if he dies and we don't grow closer as a family, then his death was in effect for nothing.
Hmm.
But through this tragedy, if we can grow closer, then we can actually get something good out of this tragedy. And some of my family agreed. And when I was trying to get closer to some of my family a couple of weeks, as I tried to hold on to my word and get closer to family and communicate with them more, I effectively did have a family member reach out to me and say, because I was trying to do something nice for them.
Right.
And
They
they
found
got
your
me,
YouTube and
yeah.
shunned you basically.
Well, they got me on the phone and they were like, listen, I know you're looking up this thing for me. You're trying to help me, but I just have to let you know that I don't think we should have a relationship anymore. And I
Wow.
said, what do you mean? And they were like, well, you're trying to do all this nice stuff for me, and if I just don't communicate with you, I'll feel bad. And I said, yeah, that sounds kind of crappy, doesn't it? And they were like, yeah. And I said, what is it that I've done that makes you not want to communicate with me? And when they said, well, we discovered your channel a couple of weeks ago, but then this tragedy happened with my older brother. So it was kind of like pushed off to the side.
Hmm.
And I said, well, what is it necessarily about that that is wrong or evil or bad? And of course, this family member, and I'm being vague on purpose, couldn't tell me exactly what I had done because they hadn't watched any of my content. The nice thing for me is ever since I started my channel, whenever I would be in conversation with my family, if the topic came up, I would share my pure, unadulterated beliefs with them. Not in an effort to hurt their feelings or anything like that, but just because this is what I believe and here's why, and I'll show you
Right.
from the scriptures. When it came to blood transfusions, which has affected my family, when it came to just different topics, I never shied away from my beliefs. And the reason I think this is so important is because when I got that phone call telling me, I figured out about your channel, you're an apostate, why didn't you tell me about your channel 7 years ago? And I told that family member, I said, this conversation right now is why I didn't tell you about my channel. And I said, however, because I knew you wouldn't communicate with me if you knew. I said, however, though, have I ever hidden my beliefs from you? And have I ever hidden my thoughts about your beliefs from you? And they said no. And I was like, well, that's that. The
Hmm.
only reason I hid the fact that I had a channel is because I knew the moment you found out, you would have a reason to no longer communicate with me.
Yeah.
And but it wasn't for lack of me being transparent with my beliefs about their beliefs. So I can say that there was if anybody's watching this who's a former Jehovah's Witness and doesn't share their beliefs anymore, I will say that is probably one of the biggest weights lifted off of my shoulder is just my pure, unadulterated, not mean, um, clairvoyance with my family about my beliefs about their beliefs.
Hmm.
And if because I was true and honest with that, when I had that conversation, I was able to lean back on that, which was awesome.
Hmm.
So to answer your question plainly is like I don't have a super close relationship with any of my blood family anymore,
Hmm.
which is difficult, but I'm also at a point in my life where I just think it's so much more important to not lament that. I'm here with open arms if they
Right.
want me. But
Exactly. It's on them, it's not on you.
of course,
Right.
and if I devote energy to being upset about that, I really am just shackling my own wrists and ankles.
Hmm.
Like it is so much better for me to just sort of move forward and put energy into other things than it is for me to lament or mourn relationships that I don't have that other people don't seem interested in either.
Right. Well, that's a good way to look at it because I mean you're basically just resigning to what it is, and if it changes in the future, it'll be what it is.
Right.
Hmm.
Exactly.
So great. So Brandon, I'm gonna ask some general questions that like to ask all my guests. I kind of hop in those right now, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's start off with just a simple question: Is how would you define a spiritual awakening?
A spiritual awakening. I think when you recognize that there is something outside of just, again, cause and effect, but even what you and I are engaging in, something like rational thought, and we're talking about different concepts that actually can't be measured in a lab, that would be a spiritual awakening. So, I always tell people, what does courage smell like? How much does bravery weigh? These are what color is love?
Hmm.
These are all things that you cannot
They're like
pour.
abstract concepts.
Yeah, you can't pour hydrogen peroxide and mix it with salt and like something prints out on a computer and it says, "Oh, this is love." It's
Right.
it's not that. We are mind, we are body, we are spirit, right? So when you start focusing on any concepts outside of the material realm, to me that is a spiritual awakening.
Hmm. Good answer. Our next question is, what would be the most valuable lesson that you've learned in life so far?
Probably a probably a commitment to humility
Hmm.
and a willingness to change your mind if you're presented with better information. I don't
Hmm.
want to say more true information because true's true no matter what, right?
Right.
But ultimately, if you encounter better information, then a willingness to change your mind in that aspect.
Hmm.
So I don't advocate for being so open-minded that you just accept everything. Again, for me, the whole reason I came into faith was because I had a openness to hearing different perspectives, but it also needed to be girded with some sort of reasoning or evidence behind it. So being open-minded with also the expectation that there's something rational attached to it in order for you to trust it.
Like some discernment.
Yeah, I think discernment and then just, kind of like figuring out what those tools are because the organization was really good at spoon feeding us everything, right?
Hmm.
Like like just believe it because we've already done the research for you.
Just
So
trust us. Have faith in Jehovah.
yeah, exactly. But that's what I'm talking about. If I'm supposed to love with all my heart, soul, strength, and mind, then I get to utilize my mind. I don't have to check it, at the
Right.
door again. So it's like when someone quotes an article, because I've been duped in the past, and if I see a quote from an article, I mean, you're in media, so like a quote can be mishandled.
All day.
Yeah. So
And when you're quoting from yourself, like who's the source if you're just quoting from yourself? You can't really do that.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like for me, it's like if I see a quote, I go and I look at the whole darn article. You know what I
Hmm.
mean?
Get the
Like,
whole context.
is this person saying what they're saying? So it's like I had to develop tools outside of being spoon-fed. So things like hermeneutics, which is just a fancy term for, who is the writer? Who are they writing to?
Hmm.
Is it poetry? Is it history? Is it what type of material is it? So that I can draw forth what the truth of this material is, not insert my truth into whatever text I'm reading.
Hmm.
So hermeneutics was a good one, and then just like again, critical thinking, or how do I know what I know? So it's like asking myself questions to see if my own conclusions were actually girded with some sort of evidence.
If only more people were as critical as you've been throughout your life, I think the whole world would be a better place, I'm sure.
Well, I think it's like I've been naturally given a curiosity. Like growing up, I loved zoo books and I love fun facts about, the most ridiculous thing. And my wife makes fun of me because she's like, "How do you know weird facts about like, ants or something like that?" And it's like
Hmm.
I pull this stuff in, and if it's quirky or weird, it just has a special place in my brain.
Yeah. All right. So my last question is, what would be your advice to someone who's going through a spiritual awakening? Or maybe someone's like, I'm getting these questions, or I think I'm questioning my beliefs or the way I was raised. What would be your advice to them?
look at all of it. Don't have any fear. That's the other thing too, is like I talked earlier about having this commitment to humility, but ultimately I do believe that if you are really seeking after God, he's not going to hide himself from you
Mm.
if you're actually seeking, right? And the reason I say that is because like right now in my home, I have a Quran, I have a Book of Mormon, I have a New World Translation, I have different translation of the Bible. Um, I can I can literally have Anton LaVey's Satanic Bible in my home, and I don't think it's inviting demons into my home.
Yeah, my brother's the same way.
The reason is because is like I go to these things because I want to know, like, first of all, it's either true or it's not true. And if it's
Hmm.
false, I can show you from your own material that it's false. Right? So it's like I would rather have it and have access to it, but the whole reason I don't fear is because I'm honestly trying to seek after what is true. My whole contention would be it's not that I've found a what that it's true, I've found a who that is true. Like when Jesus says I am the way, the truth, and the life, if I start with a relationship with him and I revere him as my Lord first and everything flows out from him and I compare everything against him, I can figure out if it's true or false based off of that. Now, some people would say that that's kind of biased, but I'm not going to lie. He happens to be my favorite example, but he also is my king. He's my Lord. So
Hmm.
I use him as the metric, and I also think he's the one who invites everyone to a supernatural kind of existence.
Very high standard, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, in conclusion, why don't you share your YouTube channel? Where can people find you once again? And just remind us what you blog about or what you post about.
Yeah, the name of the channel is BornAgainExJW, and what I'm really trying to do is take a apologetics approach or a defensive approach to the beliefs of Jehovah's Witnesses. So I'll often try and talk about what their beliefs are from their material, and then I'll try and use scripture to show people what a better understanding of certain doctrines would be. So that's the whole approach of my channel.
I'd imagine like certain beliefs like 607 BCE wouldn't be that hard to defend, I would assume.
Yeah, it's interesting because again, if I use history should line up with what we find in the scripture
Oh,
for the most
definitely.
part, you know. So
100%.
it's if you have all of these historians saying no, this is actually when the temple was destroyed, it just behooves you to like, okay, you know, that's when the temple was destroyed, especially because it wasn't specifically laid out in the scriptures.
Hmm.
Their wacky calculations were, but not you can't actually find it in the scriptures.
Exactly. Well, Brandon, thanks so much for spending some time sharing your experience, sharing your story with me. I learned a lot from you, and good luck to you and your wife.
I appreciate that very much, Monty. Thank you for having me on the channel today.